Okay, thank you, Rachel, and welcome to everyone. We may have a few more people join us, but I think we have most of the people on board that we were expecting. So just want to welcome you to the session for the meeting where we will focus on equity in education, and we're going to use qualitative data as a focus for this meeting. But before we get started, I want to introduce myself and a few other individuals from the coordinating board. I'm Ruby Stevens Morgan, the Director of Strategic Planning and Analysis. I've been with the coordinating board for 8 months, and I came from Prairie View A&M University as the Director of Institutional Research for almost 9 years. I've worked in K through 12 as an instructor. I have worked as a teacher, also in higher education and in K through 12 administration, and with some data responsibilities in those positions. So I am well aware of the challenges and the rewards of working with students and working with data. And so I am excited that we have this opportunity to do some of the equity work with you. With the Lumina grant, we also started some of the equity work with the coordinating board, some of the staff at the coordinating board. And so we're starting to do some of the equity work with you. And we hope to be able to continue some of that work later. And I'll talk about that a little bit at the end. It's just hopes and dreams right now, but I'm hopeful. So with that, I want to let you know that we will do the equity portion of the training, and then we will have Elizabeth and Luis who will introduce our data dashboards for the regions to you, and then also include some question and answer around the 11 o'clock hour. So I will now turn it over to Elizabeth to introduce herself. You all will have gotten some communications from her. So Elizabeth.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Shivers. I have been at the coordinating board for a little over 1.5 years. I was working in strategic planning and funding with Ruby and Luis. However, I recently transitioned to our newly created office, which is our project management and improvement office. So I'm really looking forward to continuing to work with the agency in that capacity. I have been in higher ed since about 2002. I have been both on the faculty side and the administrative side. Like Ruby, I did spend about 4.5 years as the Director of Institutional Research at one of our community colleges here in the state of Texas. So I feel like I am familiar with some of the challenges of working with students, and I'm really looking forward to our session today, and I hope that you all find this engaging. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And now I will have Luis introduce himself, and you will hear more from him later as he introduces the dashboards. Luis?
Thanks, Ruby. Hi, I'm excited to share with you the dashboards at the 3 o'clock hour. I think 2 o'clock for you guys over there. So I'm looking forward to showing you the regional targets dashboard and the institutional completions dashboard, and letting you play around with it so you can get somewhat familiar to the data that's available on there to facilitate your regional discussions.
Thanks, Luis. And then I won't say I will have to introduce her because you all know her. You've been working with her she's your point of contact. So I will let Sherry Reyna say hello as well.
Hi, everybody. I'm your point of contact for the Upper Rio Grande Valley as part of the Regional 60 by 30 initiative that the coordinating board has been running for the past couple of years. Had the pleasure to work with Yvette and many of you over the past year or so. I've been with the coordinating board about a little over 2 years, and have a kind of I'm going to call it torrid past in higher education, both as an adjunct faculty, as a nonprofit administrator, as a philanthropist. So just lots of different kinds of backgrounds, but what's always been exciting has been what you all, in particular in your region of Texas, have been able to accomplish, and the goals and ambitions you have that come ahead. I was scheduled to see you in person in March and have, in fact, shared with you these dashboards We're doing it virtually with my excellent colleagues instead, but I'm excited about that. And glad that you'll get a chance to meet them. They are so accomplished.
Thank you, Sherry. Okay, at this time, I think that's all of the, am I missing anyone from the coordinating board that would like to say something? No? All right, then we will get started. I will turn you over, put you in the hands of Rachel, who will then talk to us about equity in education and with a focus on qualitative data.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ruby, for the introduction, and thank you, coordinating board, for having me here today and trusting me with this work. I first want to acknowledge what is happening inside this session and what is happening simultaneously outside of this learning session, and that is the continuous senseless killings of Black men, women, and children in our country. And I want to say that all of the frustration and the grief and any other set of emotions that you are feeling right now, please bring them to our learning space. They are welcomed here. We process through how can we transform our institutions so that they're serving our students, specifically our Black students, as we know there's equity gaps for them. So I want to name here that Black Lives Matter. And I just want to take a pause. We'll pause for a bit and then we'll jump into our session. So we'll pause here. Thank you. And now, with that intention set, let's move into our learning. So first things first, I want to know who is in this session. This is quite a large group, and I'm so thankful for that. Thankful for operating with this sense of abundance. That's what we're really going to be using today, is this mindset of abundance. So I'm so thankful that so many folks are here. If you could actually edit your name, rename yourself so I know who you are. I'm going to be cold calling on you quite a bit, so I want to be able to get your name right. So to that end, you'll see in your gallery walk view 3 dots. Click those 3 dots and then press rename in order to rename yourself. So I have renamed myself as Rachel Franco. You can put your first name and last name, or first name and last initial. You can also do that by clicking participants, finding your name, clicking more, and rename. So right now, I'll go into our participants list and see. Looks like a lot of us are already set up. Thank you, Denise, Karina, Layla, Rob, Monica. Excellent. V. Patton, do you need any help renaming yourself? No, you don't. You're Valerie Patton. Excellent, right before my eyes. Let's see. Kathy's good to go. A. Aranda, do you need help renaming yourself? Alma, you've already got it. Yes. There's one of my best girlfriend's name is Alma. I was just texting to her. So I'm glad that my tokaya is here. That's awesome. Cool. All right. It looks like we're good to go. Let's go ahead and keep it moving then. Okie doke. So here is our agenda that we have laid out for us. Monica, if you could unmute yourself, I'd love for you to read through today's agenda.
Sure. The first thing we're going to do is welcome and acknowledgement. The second thing is community agreements. The third thing is, why did you come today? The fourth thing is, why are we here? Today's objectives, our role working towards equity in education. We'll have time for feedback, and then the last thing would be a question and answer.
Awesome job. Thank you, Monica. I appreciate it. Any questions so far? If you have a question, unmute yourself, jump in. If not, just give me a thumbs up. Cool. I'm seeing the thumbs up. Let's move then. So here are Zoom learning agreements. The virtual learning space, as we are well aware of, is much different from our in-person learning space. but I'm gonna ask that when it comes to attendance, we treat it just as if we are in person. So to that end, if you need to step out and handle any personal priorities, please let me know in chat. That really helps me so I don't cold call you or expect you to participate in certain activities. So just let me know in chat, hey, I'm gonna step out, I'll be back in 5 minutes. That way I know what's going on with our participants. I also ask that each of us be all in and engaged in today's session. It's my assumption that the more we engage with this session, with our learnings together, the better the session will be. We don't want any hits and silence. That really doesn't help us in our equity work and becoming equity leaders. So let's be all in, engaged. Cool. Stay muted. That's to the point. We will have moments where I'll ask you to unmute yourself, but stay muted. Now these next 3, we're going to practice a little bit. Because this is such a interactive session, especially between colleagues, I'm asking that each of us has our camera on as far as we can have it on. So to that end, let's go ahead and just all of us turn off our camera. We'll start fresh. So go ahead and press stop video. You see my lovely headshot there. Go ahead and stop video. Cool, looks good. And now start video again and join us on video. Cool, I love seeing your faces pop up. Good to see you, hello, hello. Awesome. This is great. Now when it comes to chat, so often we may use chat just to connect with colleagues during a session, but I'm gonna be straight up with you, that is so distracting to me as a facilitator. So I do have some co-hosts that are from the coordinating board that are helping me with chat, but we're gonna ask that you stay off chat when prompted. So I will prompt you to use chat at certain times and we'll say, go ahead and respond to this either privately to me, and I'll share those private comments just with me, or I'll ask you to engage with everyone. So let's practice real quick. How are you feeling about today's session? Describe in one word in chat, how are you feeling about today's session? You can either chat me privately or chat everyone. How are you feeling? Valerie's great. I am feeling excited. Monica is feeling open. Thank you, Monica. I appreciate that. Curious, timely, great. Great. Everyone's feeling great. That's good. I love that. I love those positive emotions. Excited. Rob, I hear you. Thanks for letting me know. Open to new ideas. Okay. And before we get started real quick, I've seen a couple of names that I want to know how to pronounce. Lester, am I saying your name right? Or can you teach me how to say your name? Kathy, if you could unmute yourself, let me know if I'm saying your name right. I think I am, but I want to be double sure. Yep, Kathy like Kathy. Cool. All right, let's move on. So now, cold call is going to be used throughout today's session. It really helps with our engagement. So I would love to hear from one of our good people, Denise. Tell me why you're feeling good about today's session. Give me some more color on that. Denise, if you could unmute yourself. I'm cold calling on you. How are you feeling good about today's session? It seemed, I wonder if I'm off here. I'm feeling good about learning. Thank you, Denise. Sal, what about you? If you could yourself, how are you feeling good about today's session?
Same, I'm feeling good about learning something new, I guess.
Cool. Okay, we're feeling good about learning something new. Monica, thank you for correcting me. I appreciate that. Monica, is that the correct way to pronounce your name?
Yes. Thank you. I don't know how to put the accent mark on a Zoom.
Totally get it. I really appreciate you correcting me. Cool. All right, well, let's get started. So y'all got a handle of using chat and using cold call. Now we're gonna move into our learning session agreements, different from our Zoom session agreements. We're gonna be using I statements today, really focusing on our own experiences and speaking from a place of our own experiences. And what that really means to me is as a Mexican-American woman, I can only speak from my experience as a Mexican-American woman. I'm not gonna speak for all women, and I'm not gonna speak for all Mexican-American women or all Latinas. That would be impossible. So I'm really gonna be using I statements today. We will also be focusing on owning our impact, owning the impact of our institutions. So much of this work we'll talk when we're having difficult conversations, especially around issues of identity, race, gender, and so on. We can say, oh, well, that wasn't my intention. But really, we know the impact in these spaces outweighs the intention. So we're gonna focus on owning our impact, especially from our institutions. We'll also be seeking to understand each other's experiences. So while each of us are speaking from that I place, what we're gonna be doing is slowing down and really listening to what somebody is saying, seeking to understand what they're saying, not anticipating what we're gonna say next. That's what often we do, especially in these spaces. We're also going to work towards accepting and expecting non-closure. So we often expect to receive answers from a quote unquote expert, and I will be the first to say I am not an expert, and I know that instead, each of us will learn some things that may come out again later. So we may learn something in the space and then 2, 3, 4 weeks later, have that aha moment. So I want you to accept and expect non-closure. And that's like moving forward in life, right? Accept and expect non-closure. Think about which of these learning agreements you want to prioritize. Got it in your head or write it down in front of you. Which of these learning agreements do you want to prioritize? And I'm going to send you to breakout rooms. You'll have a dialog box that comes up inviting you to the breakout room. Join the breakout room. Then I'll give you a 60-second warning, and that'll be a signal to you to come back whenever you're wrapping up the conversation. So let's send you to breakout rooms right now, and you'll be discussing which learning agreement you want to prioritize today. So breakout rooms are open, and it looks like y'all are already headed that way. That's great. This participant who just popped in, can you teach me how to say your name?
This is Angeles Vasquez.
Okay.
You're asking me.
I thought it was Angeles, but I wanted to make sure. So
Yes,
good.
it's Angeles Vasquez. Mhm.
Thank you, Angeles. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So it looks like we're just waiting for the other folks to come back. And here you are. Welcome back. So easy. So I would love to hear from Yvette.
That was really quick.
Yes, it was quick. You're right. I think that was Carla saying that. Yvette, if you could unmute yourself, tell us which learning agreement you're prioritizing.
Yeah, so actually in my room, there were only two of us. So Sherry and I actually had the same one, and it was to seek to understand.
Awesome. Why are you and Sherry prioritizing seeking to understand? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, well, you know what? We spent the first 30 seconds talking about some other things, but I think that, I think what we really want to do is make sure that we're listening to what others are saying, and then internalizing in the best way that we can what messages are coming through, so that we can have a better way to know what others are really thinking, and perhaps where they're coming from.
Awesome. I appreciate your honesty, Yvette, first of all. But you're right. Seeking to understand really is about slowing down and hearing their perspective, because at the end of the day, why we're here is to really advance equity outcomes for our students. And so I know that when we're hearing from other people's experiences, we may even be hearing from students' experiences, right? All of us were students at one point, and those stories that we have within ourselves, we can use those stories to impact students' work or students' outcomes. So thank you for setting that intention for us, Yvette. We're gonna keep it moving here. I wanna know, why are you here with us today? Or what do you hope to get out of today? Go ahead and respond to one of these two questions in the chat. You can respond privately to me, or you can respond to everyone. Why are you here with us today? What do you hope to get out of today? Valerie says, learn about advancing a dialogue about equity. Absolutely. We are going to be learning about which language pieces we can use in order to have those equity conversations with colleagues. Robert, way to go. Way to put yourself out there. Welcome. Monica's in the same place. I'm in day 4 of a new position, gathering as much information as possible to have equity central to my work. I love that. That is such a great grounding sentiment for our session today. Thank you, Monica. Angeles, we will absolutely get to that piece a little later in the session, but we'll learn how to talk about that piece in our session today. Christiane, can you help me pronounce your name? Is that the right pronunciation? Christiane?
Christiana.
Christiana? Awesome. Thank you, Christiana. Ooh, y'all are just rolling in here. I love this presentation. Rob says gaining insight to other perspectives. Alma says hoping to align work and collaboration regarding goals and metrics. We'll absolutely level set on how to get to that, Alma. Carla says, as a data analyst, I am most interested in data gathering and most importantly, data dissemination. We've got a ton of data folks in this group, which is great. I love that. We are going to be prioritizing personal experiences and relational micro changes so that we can impact equity work. But with y'all data nerds here, we're going to focus on qualitative data sets as telling a story behind our quantitative data. And we'll be talking about how can we talk about quantitative data through an asset-based lens. So that's really the work we're going to be doing today. Yes, cool. I'll share a little bit now, as I heard from you, I'll share a little bit now about why we're here today from my perspective. So from my perspective, we're here today to achieve 3 things. And that is to, 1, start a conversation on applying equity, an equity lens to our leadership. So this is just a start to a conversation. And it's my belief, or it's my assumption, that the way to start that conversation is really speaking from our own experiences. So we'll do quite a bit of work today looking at our own experiences, what's going on below the surface of our leadership, in order to advance equity outcomes. I believe that when we begin to see the full spectrum of our own humanity, all of the different values that we have, the experiences that when we look at the full spectrum of our own humanity, then we can start to see the full spectrum of the humanity of our own students. So this is a real starting place of us looking at our experiences. I'm also going to acknowledge that this work takes time. But what's confusing right now, or what's hard right now, especially with Black Lives Matter, is we know that there's an immediacy to this moment. So my hope today is that we will get some tools and some exercises to respond to the immediacy of this moment, but also we can recognize that this work requires toolkit building, knowledge sharing, and practice, 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 practice. I want to say to that end that in the spectrum of anti-racism work, or in the spectrum of consciousness building, to use those terms, we may have the language of equity already. We may already know what to say, the right words to say, the language pieces, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're living by equity values on a day-to-day basis, or that we're performing the labor of equity. So a lot of our universities have released statements in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, or we have performed some equity work in our language, but we have not yet given that equity work action. So today I'm hoping that we can move towards action, move from the language of equity towards the labor of equity. Cool, I'll move through these next couple of slides quickly. I am Rachel Franco from Maya Consulting, and Maya is an Austin, Texas-based education consulting firm that is really made up of a team of educators working towards equity. We believe equity is a starting place, and we'll talk about that later today too. Equity is the starting place for our work. And we do our equity work through strategic planning, project management, diversity, equity, and inclusion advising. So today's session really is an equity learning session. And from learning sessions, what I'll do is I'll work one-on-one with leaders on how to implement diversity, equity, and inclusion from a systems level or systems approach. So I'm Rachel Franco, born and raised Austin, Texas. I grew up in a single parent household that had chronic trauma and chronic stress every day. And those experiences that I have, and I know some of the folks in this learning session share those experiences, really, really impacted my belief in the power of belonging and how we can create belonging for our students in order to impact learning outcomes. So from adolescence, I was a first-gen college grad at DePaul University in Chicago. And after DePaul, I started teaching in Detroit, felt like I didn't know enough. So I continued teaching, but this time I wanted to teach with my gente, with my people. Down to Austin, kept teaching, still didn't feel like I knew enough. So I pursued my master's in education at Harvard and really studied the intersections of identity and lifelong learning outcomes. So language, identity, and how it connects to educational outcomes is my bread and butter. That's what I'm all about today, and I feel so privileged to talk about that today with y'all. Sherry, if you could unmute yourself from the coordinating board. Sherry, if you could read today's objectives, I would so appreciate it. Oh, Sherry, you're on mute. Darn it.
I'm unmuted now. Today's objectives are to review equity as it relates to the education system and to connect our identities to equity-minded leadership.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sherry. I appreciate it. Go ahead and give me just a 5. 5, I understand these objectives. Fist or 0, I have no idea what's going on. 3, I'm somewhere in between. I got a 4 yesterday that I thought was kind of cool. Sherry's giving me a 3. 5. Come on, y'all. Let me see. Where are you at? 5, 4, 2, 3s. Some of y'all are not even on video. What is this? I thought we talked about this earlier. Turning on our cameras. Come on, y'all. So let me level set here on our objectives. This first objective, reviewing equity, is us defining the difference between equality and equity. We oftentimes use those terms interchangeably, and they do not mean the same. I'll put that work on y'all to do. We'll touch on that work super briefly, and then we'll spend the majority of our time together really unpacking our identities, going below the surface, and how those below the surface experiences impact our leadership in equity. So that's what we're doing today. Looks like y'all got some heads nodding yes. Sounds good. First objective, and I'm looking for a volunteer here, unless it's crickets and I'm going to cold call you. I'd love to hear, what is the difference between equality and equity? I know you've seen this illustration before, so I know you're an expert on it. What's the difference between equality and equity? If you'd like to volunteer, just unmute yourself and jump in.
Equality is when everybody gets the same thing, this idea that everybody deserves the same, whereas equity is getting what you need to be at the same place or the same level, to have equal opportunities to whatever that is.
Is that you, Monica, who's speaking?
It was, yes.
Awesome, thank you. I want to make sure. So I heard Monica say that equality is really one size fits all, and equity is recognizing that people need different things to be successful. Monica, can I push you a little bit further? I want to hear, how do you think about these terms in relation to your work that you do? And I know you have a new role, but if you could just reflect on that a little bit, what do these terms mean to you in your work?
So it's hard for me to project, but something that comes to me as an educator and just as a human is trying to understand where individuals are coming from, and to understand what their individual needs might be, and to understand in terms of education that one size does not fit all, and we have to look closely at the data. We have to look closely at various demographics and what is happening to really think about equity. I would take it one more step further and say we need to pull down that whole wall and call it liberation.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
That's for another conversation, perhaps.
So actually, I love that sentiment. I'm on the same page as you, and I'm going to ask that you bring that energy into today's conversation so that our colleagues can learn from you and learn from each other. Absolutely. Let's take down the wall and work towards liberation, and liberation for all of us, right? It can't be missed here that Monica is really saying that we need to understand the individual experiences of our students, their individual needs. We'll get into that work today because I know that our students are really demanding in this moment that we listen to them. So we're going to really flex our listening muscles today. So Monica already gave great definitions for equality and equity. If you want further definitions, they're here on this slide for you. You can capture them, write them down. Hello. Don't forget to mute yourselves, y'all. You've got the definitions here in front of you for you to use. What I think about in relation to these terms is that today we will really focus our efforts on utilizing two things, qualitative data sets and asset-based in order to strengthen our equity work. So we know that equity is everybody needs different things in order to be successful. Well, how can we get to understanding those different needs? Let's move towards qualitative data. Let's move towards gathering qualitative data so that we can better understand those individual needs. Then, when we're talking about qualitative data or quantitative data, let's apply an asset-based lens to those conversations. We'll learn more about what that is. Okie doke. So we've got this question on our slide in front of us right now. I want you to respond to this question in the chat, either to everyone or to me privately. Why is it important to keep this definition of equity in the forefront of our minds? Thank you, Layla. I see your note. Why is it so important to keep the definition of equity in the forefront of our minds? Chat me privately or to everyone. Sherry says, because language gets in the way of a common understanding. Cryptic. Sherry, can you unmute yourself and explain what you mean there?
The issues, the questions, the complexity we have to deal with is hard enough when we don't share an understanding of what the term equity means.
Okay, so you're saying what is at stake or the work that we have to do is big enough. So let's get right what we mean by when we say equity. What do we mean by that? Level setting on the definition.
Right.
Got it. I'm seeing these responses roll in. Carla's right. The world that we live in is not one size fits all. And so we want to make sure that our institutions are also not one size fits all. We're not going to be successful in that way. Yvette, you got it 100%. When we don't keep the definitions of equity in the forefront of our mind, we run the risk of really perpetuating the status quo. We know the status quo isn't working for our students. So let's level set on this definition and really work towards equity. Rob says it's critical for our society's success. We ensure all people have the opportunity to achieve their potential and contribute. Yep, absolutely, 100%. Cool. So I told you all objective 1 was going to be quick. It was quick. Now we're moving into objective 2. And this is really us going to be going deeper below the surface. This exercise, 3 things exercise, is an opportunity for you to gather qualitative data on your students, but through a much more relational way. Before we get into this exercise, I want to know from you, how do you gain qualitative data from your students? I've got a poll launched in front of you. We've got 18 participants. I would love to get all 18 of us responding to this poll question. How do you gain qualitative data from your students? I'll leave it up for just 30 seconds. So 12 out of 18 of us have responded. Go ahead and hop in the poll. I'd love to know about how you gain qualitative data from your students. And I'm looking for a volunteer here next to expand on their response, so be ready for that. Okay, I'm going to share results here. So it looks like the majority of us gain qualitative data from our students via surveys. I'm anticipating open-ended responses and coding that data, but I'd love to hear from y'all. those who answered surveys or interviews, can you give me a better understanding of what that looks like at your institution?
This is Alma. Not necessarily, we're not in academia, but we do provide a lot of training support and funds. So what we do, what we call our students the workforce, what would be our participants, is we do track them, but we also do a lot of follow-up. And that can be through the system, like direct contact with the clients to find out what they're doing and what they're kind of going through and try to get that feedback. And then, of course, we case note that to share that as well. So that could be one person doing that or several different moving pieces kind of reaching out to that participant or student to kind of see what they're doing.
Muted myself. Alma, I really appreciate that you follow up with this data on students or on stakeholders, because it sounds like you're on the workforce end. Is that right?
That's correct.
Awesome. So it sounds like you follow up on this data, which is great, because so often we can gather qualitative data and let it sit in our offices. But I love that you take the extra step of going back and follow up. I'd also like to know, Alma, how do you make your qualitative data actionable?
That's a good question. So based on a lot of the stuff that we are gathering from the data, we also can use that data to kind of develop programs and projects or initiatives. So if we're seeing that, you know, for example, there's X amount of students who are starting to struggle with a certain barrier, then we know that that's a barrier that we have to address, and we'll try to come up with an initiative around that. So for example, in working with our university, 2 weeks ago, they told us that because of COVID, the impact to their already homeless population probably got exasperated. So, and she's also on the call. Mariela and I, you know, kind of quickly debriefed, and then there was an opportunity to try to pull down some funding and try to pilot something to try to address that. So, I mean, sometimes we're really nimble and are able to react that way, but I think more than anything, that's how we kind of make the data sing, you know what I mean, too, and tell the story, you know what I mean. So, and that's how we, I think, apply that data.
Awesome. I really appreciate you expanding on your work there for us, Alma. So much of these responses, I hope that y'all can hear your colleagues and kind of take away what your colleagues are doing. I know what I'm taking away from Alma is this redesign piece. So I've received this qualitative data. Now I'm going to redesign policies, practices, and my own leadership in order to impact student experiences. And I love that you pointed out our students who are experiencing homelessness, because I think, this is my assumption, I think when we hear that our students are experiencing homelessness, we don't necessarily act on it immediately because we are so overwhelmed with knowing that they are experiencing that. So that being said, I'm going to pause there. Let's look at this 3 things exercise. I want you to be able to use this exercise not only with your students, but also with your colleagues to get below the surface. Right now in front of you with a pen and paper, write down these 3 things. It's really 12 things. 3 things you're passionate about. 3 events in your life that made you who you are. Really go below the surface and think through these responses meaningfully. I'm going to give you just 3 minutes to respond to each of these 3 things, and then you'll be in breakout rooms and you'll share every single one of these 3 things. And if you need permission, I'm going to give you permission right now. You do not need to share every single bit of part of you. If you're feeling an emotional response coming up, it's okay. You can accept that response and bring it, or you can say, you know what, I'm not going to go there today. That's fine, totally fine. Okay, my timer went off, and I would love to know, thumbs up, y'all are ready to go to breakout rooms to share out, or do you need more time? I'm seeing thumbs up. All right, I'm going to send you to breakout rooms. Go ahead and share with a colleague in breakout rooms each of these 3 things. Layla or Angie, do you need help getting to breakout rooms? Hey y'all, welcome back. I know we got some other folks joining in, coming in. We'll wait for those folks to join us. I know you were in breakout rooms for a little longer than you anticipated maybe. I was getting wrapped up in a conversation with Carla. So I want to bring some of that conversation out. Carla, if you could unmute yourself, I would love to. Hello.
Hi.
I would love to hear more about your experiences as a mother. So that sounded like that was one of the identities that was most salient to you. So how does being a mother show up in your work and education?
Of course, I'm not only a mother, but I'm a mother for a little girl with special needs. So every time I think about equity and equality, I think what my daughter might be experiencing in her very long road that she has ahead of her. She's only 4, so she's starting school. So every time I think of how the world could change and what I could change for the world, I could do for equity and equality for her, I think it's how I now navigate, right? That's how I do. I go thinking how I could change this world to make this world more. Sorry, I'm crying. You know, I'm crying in front of people that I don't know. So I would like to see how I could change the world for better for her and for everyone else that might encounter these issues. Now that she's not only a Latina, half Latino, she's a girl with special needs. So that's what I think.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you for sharing and thank you for your tears, honestly. Tears are such a sign of us in this work that we care about this work, that we're passionate about it. And so those tears are welcomed now and throughout the session as we share these parts of ourselves. Absolutely 100% acceptable. Robert, I was thinking of you, you're on my list here. Robert, if you could unmute yourself and share with us how different parts of your 3 things show up in your work.
So you're talking about an assessment of all the 4 that you spoke, of the 4 categories, or?
Yes, sir.
So for me, and I love what Carla, her passion there, and no need for tears. And one thing I would say, there's no such thing as half Latino, half Latino. My wife is not Hispanic, but she grew up in El Paso, so that's a totally different thing when we grew up in El Paso, because it's a different experience. And so, whether our daughter, you can say halfy, but it's still the Latino experience. And for me, that's the part of it that I really had to grow into. El Paso was such a unique environment that it really shaped me for the rest of my life. In fact, my high school was probably the most racially mixed at the time, back in the 70s, to where I had, and I played athletics, which was a great level as one of my master's teachers. That's a great leveling experience because you're mixed with guys from different background, black, white, and brown. So that really shaped me from then on. Being in education and having that drive, while my mother didn't graduate from high school, but she had that drive in us to all achieve degrees. I just have the most at this time, and leading me on to get my doctorate, and then ending up in higher ed and becoming that door for a lot of students that don't think it's possible, of all different ages. And I wear that. I have some titles now, but I don't worry about the titles. It's because because of those titles, I can create access and be out in the community doing the work I get to do. And so those things really, those are my main focuses. I love higher ed. I love what we can do with it.
Awesome. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate you being a cold call participant and sharing those parts of your own identity. What I really, really love about what you shared is how energized and focused you feel about being a window and mirror to your own students, recognizing that you have certain experiences, that your students share those experiences. That's what I believe the work starts with, is recognizing all of the things that we have within us, our students also have within them. And so how can we both leverage our experiences to support students, but also take a step back and let them step in and lead their own learning, student-led learning. So thank you, Robert and Carla. We're going to be moving into this next exercise, which really functions in the same way, but also in a different way. We're going to be looking at where we're from. So I'll share where I'm from through a poem, and then you will write your own poem. And same thing, you'll be in breakout rooms. You'll share that poem with you and a colleague. And I want you to focus on what do you have in common with your colleague? And how does where you're from show up in your work? Cool. So this is where I'm from. I am from Pots on the Stove, Bluebell ice cream, and Quaker Oats. I am from the red brick two-story, trailer home, duplex, and the woods behind them. I am from aloe vera plants, growing wild against the broken down red truck. I am from Great American cookie cakes on your birthday and really brown hair. From Roxanne, Theodore. I'm from talking too loudly and with your mouth full. From get your elbows off the table. And I'm so proud of you. I'm church on Sundays, fried chicken Sundays, nap all afternoon Sundays. I'm from Austin, Texas, and San Luis Potosí. Barbacoa tacos and barbecue chicken. From Papa Grande running away from the police with his shoeshine kit. The scar on my brother's lip and the other on his eyebrow. The pictures of family members now gone. The yellowed cigar box sitting empty. The UT football cap unmoved from the altar in the front room. Sacred elementos honoring the lives of those that came before. I've shared where I'm from. Now, where are you from? You are now going to spend the next 5 minutes writing your own Where I Am From poem, but stopping at name of family member and another family member. And Elizabeth, if you could drop in the link to the poem, I would so appreciate that. That way, folks, you can have the template right in front of you if you need it. So you'll spend the next 5 minutes writing, stop at the name of family member and another family member. So if you are looking for the template bigger, click on that link that Elizabeth just dropped into the chat. You have just about a minute left. If you need more time, if you could just tell me in the chat about how much more time you need. Otherwise, good to go and you are ready to share out with a colleague, just give me a thumbs up. Awesome. Thank you for chatting me privately. I'm going to give y'all just about 1 more minute. Okie doke, I'm going to send you to breakout rooms. You will be sharing your poem with your colleague, looking for commonalities. What do you have in common with your colleague? So right now we're in breakout rooms. Valerie, do you need any help heading to breakout rooms, or Yvette, Angie? Welcome back, everyone. As some of us finished a bit early, that's fine. It looks like we're just rolling right on in. Sherry, I'm bummed to hear that. I'm not sure what the issue is. That's a bummer. Okie dokie, it looks like all of us are back. Welcome back. I'm gonna cold call Karina. If you could unmute yourself, Karina. Where are you? There you are.
I am so sorry. I was not with anybody and I left for like 10 minutes and I couldn't do the task.
That's okay. I appreciate your honesty. You probably sent me a note. I had a couple of folks send me notes.
I did.
Yep. Angie, what about you?
So I was in a breakout room actually with one of our colleagues, Alma, and she was describing about her parents and, you know, her upbringing, about how she was one of the only family in her block that was Mexican American, describing her challenges for her mother because of her older brother had a disability, and she had to be really strong, and you don't really realize how strong adults need to be until you're an adult. And you don't really realize it when you're growing up, you know, with your siblings. But it sounds like she's very influenced by the work ethic of her father and her upbringing, and is very much she carries it in her heart, her neighborhood and her upbringing.
Thank you so much, Angie, for sharing those parts of what you heard from Alma. Alma was your partner, right?
Yes.
Alma, I'd love to hear from you yourself. How do those values that I heard come out, values of hard work, values of community, values of family, how do those values show up in your work in education?
Well, I have to first say, Rachel, the second place kind of threw me off a little bit.
Sure.
But it's important, you know, I do want to share because I think it's important. What I had shared with Angie was I growing up and, you know, I wouldn't say necessarily in a privileged neighborhood, but I mean, it was definitely, there was a lot of security. It was a very good neighborhood. Very Norman Rockwell. I mean, you know, it was like all the neighbors hung out together, all the kids played outside. It was very, very safe. And that was very formative as well. But as I grew up, I realized I started and my parents always instilled very, very strong work ethics, a lot of accountability, especially being, you know, for a first generation American. There's my parents, you know, were very quick to let us know about, you know, what the privileges are and almost the responsibility to our family members that were not here in the United States. But more than anything, I think as I got older and I had my own children and things like that, being able to kind of reflect back and think of everything my parents went through. What I had shared with Angie is I have an older brother who was born with cerebral palsy, extreme. And from birth, they had pretty much told my parents they were going to make it. And at the time, you know, my parents did not speak any English at all. And most of their medical care were by physicians that did not speak Spanish. So there's a lot of stuff like that. But I mean, you know, but at the end, even though my mom, when she moved here, she had probably a 4th grade education, she actually ended up getting an education degree and specializing in working with children with special needs. And she was a big advocate. And then of course, you know, just like that strong ethic. And I mean, I think even in the other breakout session, you know, in talking to
Darn it.
Can you hear me? Okay, sorry. Yeah, and talking to Elizabeth, it's just kind of funny because there might be different backgrounds and stuff like that, but you know, there's so many commonalities too. And anyways, I guess a point is, I think all those things that are very formative, I try to reflect upon that in my work and what we bring to our clients and our participants, because there were still so many challenges I had growing up, you know, for different reasons. Missed opportunities, not taking advantage of certain things, just wrong decisions, good decisions, you name it. But when I think of going back to the equality and equity and things like that, and I never forget that. So I try to bring that to my job as much as possible. And I think that keeps me passionate about it. So at least that's what I strive for.
Awesome. Thank you, Alma, for sharing so much of your story with us. I really, really appreciate it. And I don't take it lightly that each of us are sharing things that are truly below the surface. And that's a privilege to hear those things at work. So often at work, we don't get the opportunity to hear what's going on beneath the surface of our colleagues. So I appreciate that. Something that I'm holding right now is that Alma, when she was speaking with Elizabeth, brought out that there may be differences within our identities with each other, but there's so much commonalities that are in place. And we can easily dismiss that, but I think, and I'm gonna speak specifically from a Latinx perspective, so often for me, I can focus so much on the experiences of Latinidad, and that actually limits me from seeing the experiences of other marginalized groups in this country. So it's like this both and piece of like, yes, I want to rise, what is that, rise as we climb as we rise. I want to be able to lift Latinidad in my own work, but I also want to see that there are other marginalized groups within this country that that we need to be lifting as well. And so not just zeroing in on our own communities, but also expanding liberation, right? One of our participants, I think it was you, Monica, who said earlier, let's work towards liberation for everyone, as equity is the starting place. Now I'm getting on my soapbox a little bit, so I'm gonna keep it moving. Sal, if you could unmute yourself, I'd love for you to read this quote for us.
Living our identities is much like breathing. We don't have to ask ourselves each morning who we are. We simply are. Identity is never fixed. It constantly evolves, but something in it stays constant. Even when we change, we are recognizably who we are, who we have always been. Identity links the past, the present, the social world into a narrative that makes sense. It embodies both change and continuity.
Awesome. Thank you, Sal, for reading. I know it's hard sometimes to read and process at the same time, but I'm gonna ask you, when you were reading Sal, I don't know why I had Rob in my mind. Anyway, while you were reading Sal, I'm curious, how does this quote apply to our students?
I think, how do I say it? Our students live their identity every day. They're not asking themselves, and they're not necessarily asking themselves introspective questions as far as who are they. I mean, they're really, a lot of times it's a product of their interactions, what they see in the world, what they've experienced. And I think that's going back to equity. That's kind of what we have to ask ourselves regarding our students, you know.
Sorry, can you flesh that out a little bit more for me? What do we need to ask our students?
We need to ask ourselves questions, you know, regarding really what is it that our students are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Are we, you know, do we have an actual grip as to the reality of it? Because I think so many times it's really easy to say, well, you know, I struggled when I was in college. They should be able to, you know, pick themselves by the bootstraps, which isn't the case in most situations, because if we were able to succeed, I mean, it's because we probably had some kind of support network or some support that helped us, which not everyone does.
Absolutely, Sal. I love that you brought in this bootstraps metaphor. I'm sure y'all feel the same way. Whenever I hear bootstraps, I think about, but what if you don't have bootstraps, right? Somebody has said that before. And so you're right, Sal, we need to zero in on these student experiences and take the extra measure of understanding them. We're now going to transition into equity-minded leadership, specifically not qualitative data, specifically zeroing in on how can we use an asset-based lens or asset-based thinking when we talk about students and student data. So deficit thinking oftentimes sees the deprivation in students. So we will often look for what our students need, what they don't have, all of these things that they're bringing to campus, what do they need in order to be successful? So deficit thinking sees deprivation in students, and it approaches the student experience through overgeneralizing or through stereotyping the student experience. So basically what deficit thinking does is it writes the story for students instead of allowing students to write their own stories. Whereas asset-based thinking really prioritizes the strengths of students and the strengths that they bring to our campuses each day. Something that really blew my mind this morning as I was thinking about what if we operate from a place of abundance instead of a place of scarcity. What I mean by that is let's look for the opportunities, the resources that our students bring to our campuses and that our colleagues bring to our campuses, as opposed to us focusing on what our colleagues and our students don't have or what they need in order to be successful. Awesome, I'm getting a couple private messages. Thanks for letting me know, y'all. So if you're gonna take away anything from today's session, I hope you take this away, that the way we talk about students can have a major, major impact on the way we think about improving student achievement. So often when we're talking about students privately behind closed doors, we will talk about all of the needs they have or what they are missing. But when we do that, we're erasing all of the unique parts of their own identities. We're erasing all of the strengths that they bring and that their communities bring to campuses. Again, the way we talk about students has a major impact on the way we think about improving student achievement. And we're gonna really focus on making micro relational changes in order to impact macro systems at play. So when we talk about students, our hope is that we talk about students with an asset-based lens. And an asset-based lens is really strengths-driven and opportunity-focused. So we might look at our data for our African-American students and we can see, okay, what has been successful for this group of students and how can we build off of that success to impact all students? Asset-based thinking is really internally focused. In education, we'll use the terms locus of control. That's what we're talking about. What is within your locus of control? What is within your office in your resources and skills and abilities and knowledges that you can use in order to positively impact students? We're really talking about institutional accountability when we are applying an asset-based lens to our work. Asset-based thinking asks, what is present that we can build on? Whereas deficit-based thinking is really needs-driven, problems-focused, externally focused, and it blames the students or it blames the communities from which they come from instead of taking ownership of institutional accountability. Deficit-based thinking might ask, what additional knowledge, skills, or resources do we need to tackle these pressing problems? And the reason why that question is deficit-based is because it extends, or it places the burden on outside of our work, outside of our offices. And really, we need to take accountable for our actions and for our institution's actions. So when you hear achievement gap, or when you hear the achievement gap that is persistent between low-income students of color, particularly our African-American students and our Hispanic students, and their upper-income white peers, we're comparing our Black and brown students from low-income communities to their white upper-income peers. And the reason why that's a little bit problematic is that erases the centuries and centuries of systematic and historical oppression that our Black and brown students have faced. Some of us know that firsthand from our own individual experiences. We want to start saying education debt as a way to acknowledge that for our Black and brown students, there is such a heavier load that they are carrying when they come to our campuses. Here's a data point. You're going to be looking at some data from your region just shortly, but you've got this data point, and the work for the next 15, 20 minutes or so that we're going to be doing is applying asset-based thinking to data points just like this. So the data point is 60% of Hispanic female first-time undergraduates graduate from Northwest, another region, Texas public universities in 6 years. How would we make this asset-based? Remember, asset-based is institutional accountability, and it looks for opportunities. Asset-based thinking would look at this data set and say, our region has successfully served 60% of Hispanic female students. Our region has successfully served 60% of Hispanic female students. What has been successful for that group of students, and how can we build off of that success? So I just got a chat. Monica, take it as needed. Take it as needed because the last 20 minutes are really like my favorite part. And I know they're Elizabeth's favorite part too. But anyway, you've got this data set in front of you from your region. I want you to either capture this data by taking a picture or taking a screenshot or simply writing it down, but record this data. And then I'm gonna send you to breakout rooms. I see y'all with your cameras, that's awesome. I'm gonna send you to breakout rooms to literally apply an asset-based lens to this data. And remember, an asset-based lens is strengths-driven, opportunity focus, and it places accountability on the institution. So you've got this data here. And I'm going to send you to breakout rooms now. Right now, you should be in breakout rooms. Angeles, Mariel, Carla, let me know if y'all need help getting over there.
It didn't give me the join breakout room little.
Yeah. The dialogue.
Right.
Give me 2 seconds. Okay, what about now?
Yes, I gave it to me. Thank you.
Absolutely. Awesome. Hello, welcome back, everyone. Cool. So in breakout rooms, you should have gotten the opportunity to talk about the data set from universities and applying an asset-based lens to that data set. Now you have a new set of data in front of you, and I'm moving quickly here so we can get to that reflection piece that is so valuable. So you've got a new data set in front of you. I want you to respond in chat this time. How would you talk about this data set, brand new data set, utilizing asset-based thinking? So let me know in chat, either to everyone or to me privately. So right now in chat, put down how would you talk about this data through an asset-based lens. So you can choose one demographic data point to focus in on, and then how would you talk about that data point through an asset-based lens? Remember, asset is really institutional accountability and looking for opportunities. Elizabeth is getting us started. Thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate that. We have the opportunity to better serve 76% of our African American students. Absolutely. You can hear how Elizabeth is opportunity focused here in drilling down on our African American student data. So I can see some of us writing things down. Don't wait for your colleagues to give you the answer, or if you are having a hard time, let us know. We'll grapple through it together. Okay, I'm gonna use some cold call here to get the conversation moving. Valerie, if you could unmute yourself. what's coming up for you right now? How are you thinking about applying an asset-based lens?
I use affirmative inquiry. And so when I look at people's lives experience, I think a lot about that every student brings to the table, just like in this discussion, very unique sets of perspectives that advocates for learning environments. So when I look at this, I'm thinking we have lots of opportunity to advocate for these students from their individual positions to create structures that advocate for graduation.
Valerie, I'm with you. I'm totally with you in gaining the full student experience. And I'm going to push you, Valerie. Can you look at maybe, let's look at our Hispanic male data point of 20%. How would you talk about the fact that 28% of our Hispanic males are going through our public CTCs, achieving success in our public CTCs? How would you talk about that data point?
Well, that's a good start, but we need a lot greater access. And this comes all about the transition between graduation from high school and continuing enrollment into college experiences, so that essentially those students are equipped with skills and knowledge to be generative in the next generation. So I've done a lot of interviewing with male Hispanic students, particularly in the El Paso area. And one of the things they talk about is that what they do in their journey changes the future for their children. So again, this goes back to the qualitative conversation that we can have with students about how it's not just about you, it's an investment in the future for your region and for your family.
Maybe somebody was trying to unmute themselves and join the conversation. Okay. Valerie, what I hear you employing is really this community cultural wealth piece, right? We need to understand our students' values and capitalize on those values in order to achieve greater student success. So for our Latinx students, we know that familiaridad, family, the value of family is huge, right? When we utilize the value of family, we can have greater outcomes. But when I'm talking about this data point, what I want to do is place accountability on the institutions. So I literally want to say our institutions have successfully served 28% of our Hispanic male students. Now, I'm not great at math, but what you could do is also flip it and look at the other poll. What is it? 78%, 72% of our students. We have the opportunity to better serve 76% of our African American students. Exactly, Elizabeth. So you're getting to that piece. 72%. Cool. We're going to now move into my favorite part of our session, and this is the final part of our session. And so if you had taken a break and have been more in a listening place, now Denise, Kathy, and you are all going to share one part of this quadrant. So each of you will reflect on all 4 questions, either recording a response or holding it in your head. But I'm going to have every single person share a response to one of these quadrants. So I know that was all mixed up. I'll say it really brief and clear. I'm going to put the timer on for 5 minutes. Respond to each of these questions. Be ready to share out your response for one of these questions. If you have questions, chat me privately. I'll flag here that oftentimes people wonder what I mean by personal identity areas. Personal identity areas could be, of course, race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, trauma experiences, being a veteran. Those are personal identity areas. Identity areas that keep coming up that we're not sure how to address. We've heard a lot of trends around equity leaders not sure how to address transgender student issues or non-binary student issues. So timer is on. You have about 1:30 left. And I want to share with you the order in which we will be sharing out. So in chat, you'll see the order that we'll be sharing out from. The person who's calling in, I forgot your name. I don't have it written down. So 1915, you'll be sharing after Denise. So that's our order. You have about 1 minute left. Awesome. So Kathy, we won't have you go twice then. Unless, is there two Kathys?
Say again?
Kathy, are you Kathy Lester?
Yes, 915, yes.
Awesome. Okay, then we'll have you go right after Denise. Okie doke. So my timer has gone off, and normally I would give folks a little bit more time, but we've got a big group here and we have 10 minutes left. So I want to be mindful of that. Alma, let's start us off. Start us off, please. Alma, where are you right now?
Where am I as far as like on each section?
Just sharing a response from one of these questions. So some of us might share where we're stuck, or maybe where we feel success right now.
Okay, I'll share too. Where I'm stuck, so for us, I mean, like I had explained, from a workforce side, we don't really, like, I wouldn't call them students, we have participants, but where I'm stuck a little bit is on the staff engagement. The staff that works directly with our participants. I'm a little bit stuck on that because I'm hesitant to overjudge and think that, you know, we have a lot of staff that just aren't engaged or aren't like completely in it. But when we do deeper dives and see like some of the services, you know, I see some gaps, and I just feel we've addressed them, and it just keeps coming up again, and it comes up again, and different approaches. So it's that quality piece, but you know, I'm trying to think of ways to kind of really address it, and not just kind of broad stroke like, oh, you know, you're not providing a good job because you're not engaged. You know, that's probably where I'm stuck. On the self, this one kind of really made me think of a couple things. So one thing that keeps coming up is I'm going to share, I turned 47 in April. And I think more than, I never had like an age thing, but I think, I don't know what it was. Maybe it's the whole COVID isolation thing, but I just feel like it's coming up a lot in different formats and stuff like that. And I'm having kind of some strange reactions. Definitely my personal identity is around being a mother and a wife. It's very important to me. And then something that I found kind of really interesting is being an El Pasoan. And because of what we experienced last summer, that's so many things now. You know, there's this sense of pride, cultural pride in being in El Paso. You know, that you know, the whole El Paso Strong movement. But even because I work with so many different state agencies, how that plays out, even almost in a political spectrum, you know, and stuff like that. So those are one of those things that I definitely think keep coming up, especially because of what we do and the position that I have. It's just one of those that it's like it's in the back of my mind a lot more often than it was ever before.
Thank you so much for sharing, Alma. I'm gonna say something briefly and then I wanna hear from Angeles, what's coming up for you right now and where are you? Alma, you made me think about, in terms of employee engagement, that something that a lot of folks are struggling with across regions is, how do we, as we advance equity outcomes and equity work, how do we bring our colleagues along into this work? And how can we bring some of our colleagues into consciousness when we know they can get there? They can be with us and do this work with us. That consciousness building work and in our anti-racism praxis is a huge, huge part of the work. Angeles, where are you? What's coming up for you right now?
Well, I want to say, as an institution, we've created an equity group made up of different departments, from instructional to student services, to even research, right? Research is a bit, which is where I come from, a big component of the equity group. So I think being as more resourceful as we can in our group and trying to remove barriers for our students. We did release an equity statement, and through data, looking at certain groups that we want to focus on, and for example, students placing in developmental education and so forth. So I think that's a major success. And as a self, just trying to be as resourceful as possible, and support. I think the more we work together, the different groups, like I said, the equity groups made up of different departments, the better we could work together in unity and try to avoid silos. That's the main purpose of trying to remove or helping to remove these barriers for students.
Thank you, Angeles. I love that push between collective knowledge sharing, collective toolkit building. We have to do this work together. We cannot work in silos. Also, we cannot practice power hoarding, right? Part of white supremacy culture is power hoarding. We have a certain set of knowledge and we keep it to ourselves. That's not the way we're going to advance equity outcomes. Angie, where are you right now? Let's see. Angie, if you could unmute yourself. We'll pause on Angie. What about Christiane? I hear you, Ruby, absolutely.
A lot of thoughts running through my head right now, and I don't even know where to start.
Share one thought. Of all the thoughts moving through your head, what is one that keeps coming up?
So maybe I'll start with one thought, and I actually also have a question. I'll start with my thought. One thing I was thinking about is, at our institution, we talk a lot about diversity. We have diversity statements, diversity committees, and I am thinking we really need to adopt new language. I'm thinking the word equity, the concept of equity, is something that we need to bring into people's awareness. And as long as we're just talking about diversity, we're not really doing the work we should be doing, maybe. And I strongly feel, as institutions, we have a larger purpose to, in our society, to eliminate racial injustice, social injustice. So I think we really need to look at, what can we do, and maybe also take a look at the language we use every day, and see how can we start the language to raise this awareness. Something else that was going through my head is, so earlier when we were looking at the slide of the percentage of Hispanic graduates, and we talked about asset, it was the first slide you were showing, we talked about using asset language, and so the suggestion was we look at the number of students who have successfully graduated. And I was struggling with that because I'm wondering if we always look at that as if we turn it into what we have achieved, are we closing ourselves off to the improvement we need to make and strive for?
Great question. It's a little of both, right? It's both and. By looking at the achievement that we have made, we want to focus on how can we build off of that achievement to really call out and name that we have not been successfully serving, particularly our African American students and our Hispanic students. So how can we both recognize we've had some success and we have not yet had success in large part in different demographics. So that's what we mean by that work. It's not rose-colored glasses at all. Thank you so much for sharing your wonderings and your thoughts. Christiane, we're gonna move to Denise. Where are you?
Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Denise.
Where am I? I have a lot of thoughts swirling in my head as well, especially because I think about the conflicting messages that we hear, like from the state level about funding, about how to deal with major disruptions like the COVID-19 and how that affects our students. Given that you do hear about the fear that some students and parents have, and yet there is a push for economic progress and moving things back to normal. So that's been on my mind, and how these major disruptions may have different effects on our groups of students, our students who are parents, for example, and have multiple roles that they are playing. As far as support, wow, I have to give kudos to my colleagues all over my institution at UTEP. They've been a great source of support as we grapple, because I think a lot of times at El Paso we are in a little bit of a bubble. We're different from the rest of the state, and I'm not sure the state always recognizes that. So we do our best.
Awesome. Thank you, Denise. And we're going to go ahead and pause here and stop here. I'm going to respond to Denise and then we'll transition. When I'm thinking about moving towards the beginning, you know, when I'm opening up in the fall, what I'm thinking about is serving students' psychological and safety needs first before we can get to those learning outcomes. Because if our students do not feel safe, healthy, all of those different Maslow's needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if we're not meeting those needs, then we can't get to the learning outcomes. But how we meet those needs can also be through equitable strategies and practices. I want to mention one more thing before we move on to our exit ticket. Christiane brought up this aspect of diversity. And for me, I know I'm getting in hot water here, but these terms mean nothing without action behind them, right? And so often our institutions want to prioritize diversity, but what can happen there is we'll focus on tokenization and tokenizing students' experiences, which is really, really dangerous. Because then if we focus on diversity and we focus on hiring folks who look like our students, what if they're coming to our institutions without us having any inclusive measures of support, right? Because we can't have diversity without inclusivity, without like measures of belonging. So then really, let's put aside diversity, let's put aside inclusion just as terms and really focus on equity. Equity is the starting place. So that's what I want to end us on with those thoughts. I'm sorry to Marielle and Kathy and Valerie, Robert, for not being able to share, though. I think that y'all are fine with that, I'm sure. I'm gonna drop in an exit ticket for you all today so I can get these final thoughts about how you enjoyed today's presentation. And let me just do that real quick, dropping it in the chat. I so enjoyed learning with you all today. It has really been such a privilege, and I am here for you for all of your needs. Please email me, I'll drop it in the chat. If you have, if you want to continue the conversation or if I could be a support to you, please reach out to me. I'm happy to talk. So there's your exit ticket. There's my email. It's in the chat. And from here, I'm going to pass it off to the coordinating board. Thank you all.
Wow, thank you, Rachel. And thank all of you for your tremendous engagement. And sorry we ran out of time and didn't get a chance to hear some of your individual feedback. I would like to ask, and I hope this is okay with Elizabeth and Luis, and because I know Rachel wanted to allow us our time, is there anyone that really you have something burning that you would just really like to get off of your mind before we make a shift to the dashboards? Because I know this is one of those topics that things that, you know, can sometimes leave us in when we talk about having those unanswered questions and things that are left unresolved. There's so many questions that will continue to remain, but is there anyone that has anything that's burning that you'd like to say before we move on?
Please, please, please. I love this opportunity. Thank you, Ruby.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to give you that opportunity just in case. So thank you again, Rachel, and we appreciate all of your engagement. And just know that we are here at the coordinating board to work with you as well, me or Luis or Elizabeth, any of us, that if you have a question and if there's something that we may be able to help you with, just please reach out to us, and I will put my email address in the chat as well. But if you have any questions, just reach out to us. I'm hopeful that we will be able to move to the point of advancing the equity training and being able to provide more support for our institutions. So we're really hoping to be able to do that. And so just continue your conversations, continue your work, and just know that we're here to support you. So with that said, we will make the transition to our data dashboards, and I will turn you over to Elizabeth and Luis. So thanks again, everybody.
Okay, thank you very much. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna transition and we're gonna share with you our 1.0 version of our regional dashboards. So we have created some dashboards using Tableau, which Luis is going to hit some key features for us to introduce us to those dashboards. This is a really brief introduction today, but we just want to get some initial thoughts and what your initial feelings about the dashboard are. We were getting a lot of questions about regional data, so this is why we chose to start here, to see if we could give some more availability of data to you all. Partway through, we will be sharing a link for you and letting you play a little bit with the dashboards on your own. Please know the link will still work after today's meeting. It will be active at least for a while. We don't know that this will be the final location, but when we're ready to officially roll out the dashboards, we will notify all the institutions so that they know, as well as let our regional advisory members know. So, almost forgot. As Luis is going through the dashboard, if you see something you really like that he highlights, please give us a 5 in the chat box. if you see something that you're not so sure about or you feel like doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense, please give us a 1 in the chat box, and that'll just kind of help us get a sense of where you're landing in terms of the dashboard's usability and the data that's included. And with that, I will hand it off to Luis.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So as mentioned earlier in the meeting, I'm going to share with you the dashboards. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you 5 features that are baked into the designs of the dashboard. And then I'm going to show you 3 manual tips that you can use for self-analysis. And I think it's kind of timely that we're doing this for regional work because, as some of you may know, the Upper East region has the highest high school to higher ed direct enrollment rate. And so that's a point of pride for this region. And on that note, I want to show you how you can find other data using this dashboard. Okay? So this URL will be shared with you in a few minutes, but I'm going to start at 60 by 30 regional dashboards. Okay. Then I'll put this into full screen view so we can all see it. Right now it's the other upper region. We'll change it to Upper East region in just a minute. But let me give you a lay of the land before I do that. So up top here, you're going to see some tabs. And this tab, Regional Targets Overview, is with the white background because that signals that that's the view that's active right now. The tabs with the light gray background signal that they're not active at the moment, but they can easily be accessed once you click on them and you'll see that white background. What we tried to do with this design is that the dashboard was really for multiple groups. One group is for folks who've been involved in the regional targets work since the beginning back about 3 years ago, and also for newbies to this work who may just come on board recently, is to get you on the same page. And the way that we did that was through this short narrative to ramp you up, to show you what is this data and how can you get started. So let me show you the first thing that we built in. Under select a region, it's a drop-down menu. So if you put your mouse on the upside down triangle, it's a drop-down list. And let's change it to Upper Rio Grande. And in this view now, we're only seeing data for your region. And what you'll notice are a couple of things that I want to share with you that we baked into the design. One is that by selecting that region, the dashboard is going to remember it across all the views. So each view is not just going to be for your region, the Upper Rio Grande region. And the other thing that you're going to notice is that this yellow color is for your region. So we try to do a little bit of branding for each region. The other lay of the land here is that the graphs are to, again, work for those who are well-versed in data, as well as those who data is not their daily responsibility. So what we're trying to do here is in 60 by 30 educated population, completion, direct enrollment, is give you a sense of progress. So from 2015, that far left black line, that's the starting point of the 60 by 30 plan. 2018 is the most current data, and so that's at the end of the bar. And the dotted green line is the 2030 target that was established by the coordinating board. Okay, so we're trying to get data discussions on an even footing from the get-go. Okay, now you'll also see our second feature that we baked into this design is towards the top up here, where I'm hovering over with my mouse. These are called bands, or some people call them KPIs, key performance indicators. What they're meant to do is to draw out and highlight data that we think is important. So in this case, we think it's important to know the current data and the 2030 target for the 3 regional target areas, so educated population, completion, and enrollment. So these numbers are to pop out at you at the beginning, okay? So the third thing that we did is that, we want to have a nice, clean look, but with doing that, sometimes we have to use a minimal approach in our design. And that can lead to more questions like, well, what does educated population mean? What is completion counting? So what we did is we put in some tooltips to help explain some of this data. Okay? And a tooltip is basically a box that's going to pop out and give you more information. Let me give you an example of that. So if I go here to 60 by 30 educated population, a box pops out to define what is 60 by 30 educated population in your region. So oftentimes at the state level, we talk about 60 by 30, but we're really trying to regionalize it to say, this is what we mean for 60 by 30 in your particular region. And each of the target areas has a tooltip. You'll also find tooltips all over the place here. So if you wanted to look at a glance at data for 2015, 2018, and 2030, you have it there. And you're gonna find it everywhere here, okay? So that's the third thing that we did. Now, let me share with you another way that these tooltips I think will be beneficial. And that's under the completions by credits view. So again, you see that Upper Rio Grande, that's the data that we're perceiving right now. So again, you look at the stacked bar chart, completions by credential type, and you see all these different levels of degree types. Well, what we did with tooltips is that it gives you more information than what would be readable on the screen. In the tooltip, you'll see a lot of the data that it's already visible on the screen, but what I want to point out is that percentage. So you can see the hard count of 35, 37 for associated degrees, but now you see that that contributes 39.3% of overall degrees awarded in the year 2014. So that way you get a little bit deeper dive into the data, okay?
Luis, we have a question before you move on.
Okay.
So the point has been made that, like, obviously our regions vary drastically. So for example, if you look at Upper Rio Grande and the Metroplex region, they have different contexts. So we're wondering, the question is, what kind of context will be provided to the public if they access this link? Is this going to be accessible to the public similar to the CB accountability?
Context, could you define that a little bit better?
Okay, so I think this is actually two separate questions. So
Okay.
the first question is, will this be accessible to the public? Which, yes, it will be when we're ultimately ready to roll it out. And then the next question is, are we going to provide any sort of context to help people understand or interpret the data? So if you think about, like, you know, Metroplex versus Upper Rio Grande, they don't have the same demographic bases, they don't have the same workforce needs, and that all of that may really be factoring in.
Well, and they also don't have the same population, right?
Right.
I mean, yeah. And I'm thinking about a year from now, we have coronavirus, so there's going to be massive changes for everybody in enrollment and degrees and that kind of thing. So is there going to be something that explains why, or explains the differences or something, the differences between the regions and, for example, the COVID?
Okay.
Well, I think the best stab I can take at that, Kathy, is that at this moment, I don't think that we're gonna go be different than our Switzerland role and just provide the data and not necessarily interpretation.
So I think this is something that we need to, Kathy, I think this is something we need to bring back to think about, because while Luis is right, our role has tended to be sort of, we try to be neutral with the data. We do also try to make sure that it's noted when there's impacts, right, that we know are affecting performance, you know. So this is definitely something that we need to take back and think about, because you're right, it matters, and people are going to wonder, right, about that context. So we need to think about how we can make sure they have information needed.
Thank you.
Okay. So I see a question here about the impact of COVID and will it adjust the metric or the goal? At this point, I don't know the response to that question.
So I do, and can I put a pin in that, and can we return to that later, because that is relevant to what I want us to discuss after we're done with the dashboards.
Okay, we'll do that. Okay, thank you for the questions, by the way. And you don't only have to put them in chat, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and just go ahead and ask directly as well. So you have both options. What I want to show you here in the high school to higher enrollment is the fourth feature that we baked into the design. And one of the things that I want to point out, as I mentioned, we have bands. In this particular band, we try to call out a number that we think is important in the direct high school to higher enrollment rate, and that's the actual rate itself. So you see 54.7 here. That's your 2018 rate, and you'll see it in a couple other different places. If you look at the bottom left line graph, you see that enrolled is 54.7, just like it is up there. And if you put your mouse on that, it'll give you a definition, it'll give you the hard count. The other place where you'll see it is broken down by sector. So you'll see how it all gets dissected. And so in 2018, how many went to ICUTS, how many went to public 2 years, and how many went to public 4 years. So you get that kind of granular data available there. The tool that we baked into here is something called a highlighter, and it's under here, select a school district. You see highlight school district. When you click on it, it's a drop-down list of it's a drop-down list of the ISDs in the Upper Rio Grande Valley. And I have a little caveat to that, and I'll just get to it in a couple of seconds. That works in conjunction with, that drop-down list works in conjunction with the box plot graph down here. So what we're looking at here is direct enrollment by ISDs for this time period, 2014 to 2018. And on the x-axis, we're looking at the percentage of students who directly enrolled into public higher education. And the reason we like this box plot is because it'll give you a quick way to compare ISD versus ISD by year. And so a couple of ways that works is we go back to the highlighter, okay? And then we can look at a couple of ways to do this. So let's say we want to look at Presidio ISD. Okay. Now, all those yellow dots for the most part are gray now. There are only a few yellow dots, and those yellow dots are Presidio ISD. So the way that you know it's them is because they're brought to the forefront, they're highlighted, but you also bring your mouse to it and it'll give you more information. So you see there the percentage, and you also see the hard counts. Now you can use that as a quick visual comparison to the other ISDs. And you may be wondering, well, you know, who else is right behind that? And so we see Socorro ISD behind that, or who's above that? And here we see another ISD. So even though the ISDs are, you know, grayed out, you can still get that information on there, okay? The one caveat that I will mention is that not every ISD will be here, and that's because of FERPA. Typically, our FERPA guideline for this particular graph is any ISD that has fewer than 25 students is not included in this set. And that's because we can't protect the privacy. So in order to comply with FERPA, we just exclude that group. Okay.
And that is consistent with our other reporting that we have in place through the CB related to our direct enrollment in our high school graduates. That same 25 is applied.
Yeah. Now, something else that I wanted to show you that we baked into here was a way for people to be able to read tables a little bit easier. Because oftentimes it doesn't matter who you get in the group and you show them a table, they want to see the trends, they want to see the patterns, like, well, what's bigger, what's smaller, what's in the middle, what comes after that. Well, two ways that you can do that are either by changing the font color in the back, the cell color, and changing the font color. So one of the examples of changing the cell color is a 60 by 30 educated population by credential. And in this table, the darker the blue, the higher the number. So you see that baccalaureate degrees have consistently been the highest degree awarded in your region. But then you can also use the color gradient scale to figure out, you know, what comes after that, what's the lowest. And a little bit easier table to read is the one right below it, because it uses that not only the cell color gradient, but also the font color. So it makes it easy for your eyes to be drawn to, for example, in 2018, there were 203,675. Well, what does that mean? That was the age group 0 to 17, and that looks like it's the highest for that particular table. So it gives you a way to quickly read this without having to do any mental gymnastics, okay? So at this point, Elizabeth, if you wouldn't mind putting in the URL so we can give our folks a chance to play around with it.
Okay, I just dropped that in the chat. And as Luis said, we're gonna give you a few minutes to sort of play on your own. And then in a minute or so, we'll put up a poll and sort of ask for your feedback in terms of whether you feel like it's easy to navigate, whether you find the information to be answering questions you've had, some potential uses you might think of for using the dashboards. So if anyone has any problems with the link, let me know, but it should work. And remember, this link will continue to work after today, so you'll have more opportunity on your own to look at it as well.
And Kathy, I think coming back a little bit to your question about looking at some of the demographic differences between regions, these tables might help to facilitate that discussion where you can compare your region versus like Metroplex or Gulf Coast or even Central Texas. So I think this might be useful for that.
Thank you.
Luis, do you want to go ahead and pop up the poll for us? So as people are getting a chance to look through the dashboard a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then after we give you a couple more minutes to play on your own, Luis is going to take us through some more information that covers both this dashboard and the other dashboard link that I'm sure you noticed that's related to institutional completions.
And if we get yes, yes, yes on all our questions, I'll give you my secret recipe for summertime lemonade.
I'm thinking Luis must have a lot of secret recipes because he keeps offering different ones to every group.
That way, when when we're back to normal, we can all have a big party and bring in all these recipes, and people be like, "Where'd you get this recipe? It's so good."
Okay, we have one more minute, so please take a moment to give us your initial thoughts in the poll. Also, if you see something you really like in the dashboards or something that you really wish was there, please feel free to share that with us in chat. All right, we got our first person.
We should have a pop quiz if this part up here, is that really Upper Rio Grande region or is that California?
Okay, y'all, about 15 more seconds. Please take the poll for us. And please know this is not your only opportunity. We encourage you to look more at these closely and feel free to email comments or thoughts about the dashboards or questions to Sherry, Luis, or myself, and we will be happy to follow up on those. Okay, y'all. We're gonna give you 15 more seconds and then we're closing the poll.
But if they stand in line, we gotta let them in. It's a federal law.
I see.
Okay.
Okay.
You want me to close the poll?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for anyone that felt like they didn't think that pieces were usable or understandable, please feel free to chat privately. If you have, if you would like to share more on your thoughts on those.
Exactly, yeah. So now I'm gonna continue with the demonstration, but I'm gonna look at institutional completions. And for that, I'm going to jump around here to public completions by race and ethnicity, because I want to show you the fifth feature that we baked into the designer dashboard. And so you saw me change the region to Upper Rio Grande, and these are all filters, so you can select a region, an institution, a year. But what I want to highlight at this point is that you have the option to show either the hard count as a value or to show it as a percent. So in this highlight table, you're seeing right now all the counts for completions by race and ethnicity for year 2018. This drop-down list will give you the option to show it as a percent. And it's doing it across the row. So if you look at the first row, Texas Tech Health Science Center at El Paso, you see the breakdown of race and ethnicity for 2018, and it all adds up to 100%. Okay, and again, there are tool tips here that you can go ahead and use to your convenience. And the view directly to the right of that, independent colleges and universities. Well, the reason you're not seeing any data is because there are no independent colleges or universities in your region. However, let's change it to a region that does. Just for an example, Central Texas. You see that in addition to value percent for ethnicity, you also have it for gender. So if you want to look at someone else's regional data, you could do that as well, okay? Something else that you get in this institutional completions dashboard is another way to navigate the different views. So you can certainly still use the tabs, or you can go all the way to the left with the upside down triangle, and it's a drop down menu. So you have all the views in one place, and you can just click on whichever view you want to access at that point. So let's go all the way to the beginning for institutional completions and targets, because now I'll show you 3 manual tips for a little bit of self-discovery. So let's change this region from Gulf Coast over to Upper Rio Grande. And it still sticks with Alvin Community College, but there's no Alvin Community College in your region. The way to get through that is it becomes a drop-down menu, and it's only for the institutions in your region. So you won't have to go looking for which particular institution ties to that. We try to make it more convenient than that. And so here, these targets that you're viewing right now, those were the ones that were submitted by each institution a couple years ago. And below that, you see a line graph that shows the actual data from 2014 to 2018. So you get a sense of the target and a sense of the trends, okay? So that was the first tip there, is that the institutions are tied to the region. So you won't have to go trying to guess which one it is. Okay. So let me change it again to Upper Rio Grande. And let's change it to the community college here, just keep it consistent. The second feature that I want to share with you is that you have this default view, but you have some flexibility to customize it to what you need. One of the ways to do that is by sorting. So here on the y-axis where you see 4,000, 2,000, and 100, when you see hard counts like that, you have the opportunity to go ahead and sort it. Right now, we're looking at ascending order by year. We can change that up. Just go to the y-axis and a bar graph pops up with the arrow pointing to the right. You click on it and you're going to then be able to sort it by highest number in descending order. So now we're looking at the total, at the highest number of overall completions overall, and we see that 2016 was the highest for El Paso Community College District. and 2015 was the lowest in this time period. So you have that flexibility. If someone says, well, I don't want to see it by years, but I want to see like how were we doing the last 5 years in terms of what was the highest and what was the lowest, where was the middle. That's a way that you could do that. Now, let's say you got another request saying, not only do I want to see that, but I only want to see it for a particular degree. In this case, I only want to see it for associates. Okay, how do I do that? Well, tip number 3 lets you do that. So this legend, as you can see, it's tied to the bar graph. That's what's going to help us accomplish that request. So by clicking on associates, we get this box that comes out and it shows you that what degree type it is, but we can also keep it or exclude it. In our example, we'll keep it because that's all we want to see at this point. And so there we have it. There we see just for associate degrees, in descending order, what were the number of degrees awarded in that time period, okay? And so let me share with you why that may be helpful, because these kind of requests may come to you often, and it's nice to have a little self-service available to folks. So what they can do with that is, over here is full screen mode all the way to the bottom right. To the left of that is download. So if someone wanted this data, they can go ahead and download some of the data. So they can download it either as an image, and that'll come out like a JPEG, PNG file, or a PDF that they can just put into one of those documents, or they can take it into PowerPoint and put in whatever comments they wanted on it. So they can go ahead and download that data, and a couple of caveats. One is when it's downloaded like that, the thing that you lose is this interactivity. So you won't get these tooltips, but you can put those comments into a PowerPoint, because I've done that before for other folks who've asked me to build data visits and they don't have Tableau. So that's quite useful. The other thing is that because we do include data on public institutions and the independent institutions, our version of Tableau, we can't separate the data. So what that means is that you cannot get the raw data at this point, because you either get it all or you get nothing. And in order to be compliant with our agreement with the private institutions, we don't provide the raw data, okay? So let's say your colleague goes through that request all by themselves and they're able to get it, but then they get a little stuck saying like, well, how do I get this view back because it's only showing associates? Well, they have 3 options. First option is to use their keyboard, and the keystroke they're going to use if they're using a Windows is Control-Z, and it starts bringing the data back. If they're in a Mac, it's Command-Z, okay? And if that doesn't work for them, they have another keystroke that they can try to use, and it's Control-R, which will refresh the page, and Command-R for the Mac users, that will refresh the page for them. And if neither of those keystrokes work for them, they can always close out the window and just go back into the URL, and it'll go back to default view. So we know that this is quite short for you to play with the data. And I'll go ahead and launch the poll and just tell you what we may have planned for the future. Sometime in the summer, we may have a larger training that some of the data fellows who are on this call may remember, that we have not only the presentation of how to use this resource, but then also some data activities so you can get familiar with it and ask questions. And at the end, our goal is that you can share it with others. We're trying to see if we can coordinate something like that in the summertime.
Okay, everybody should be seeing another poll focused on the institutional completion data. We'll give you a couple minutes again to sort of play around with that. I did want to thank both Christiane and I'm Monica. I hope I pronounced both of those correctly, for your points about how we can think about how to better apply an equity lens to this data, both by bringing up the categories of gender and economically disadvantaged. I will say right now, as you all know, that report directly to the coordinating board from your institutions. We don't currently have any data that allows us to break out gender differently than how we currently report it. This is something that has come up in our other regional meetings, and this is something that we're starting to think about and discuss at the coordinating board. We have been kind of looking to the Department of Ed for some guidance on allowing for more inclusivity in the gender options that we provide for our students. But as many of you may know, so far they haven't really taken a stance at this point in terms of how we should be treating gender identity. But that is definitely something that we're starting to think and talk about. And thank you for the economically disadvantaged category as well. We've started to start discussion and think about how could we revamp that term, right? So it fits more with our asset-based thinking, but is still clear to everyone what we're talking about. Okay, and is everyone seeing the survey? We're going to give you about 30 more seconds to please give us your feedback on this dashboard. And then, since this is a limited introduction to the dashboard, and as Louise said, we're hoping to offer a longer training on this, we definitely want to encourage you to spend some time getting familiar with it. And if you have any thoughts or any questions about either the dashboards or the data themselves or definitions for data, please feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to have those conversations. The data is correct and current that's in the dashboard. So we're just trying to get down to make sure the format is what we want before we officially publicly release it. Okay. Okay, we seem to have a couple people that can't see the dashboard, can't see the survey. Just so you know, we just asked for feedback on, do you feel like it's easy to understand? Is it easy to navigate? Does it answer questions that you have had about completions? If you would like to share your thoughts on that, you can put it in chat, send it privately, or feel free to follow up after the meeting via email. But we're going to go ahead and end this so that we can allow some time for additional questions. So does anyone have any additional questions about the dashboards before we move off of those? And I am going to return to the question that was asked earlier about the targets themselves. I have not forgotten. That is still on my mind, Alma. Okay, so here's what we would like to do with the rest of our time then. If you all have questions related to the regional efforts, we would like to ask that you put those in chat and share those with us. And in the meantime, I have a few topics that I want to cover with you that we thought would definitely be on your minds concerning the regional efforts and just things at large. So first, I would like to say that I feel like Denise was on point earlier when she mentioned that there is some concern about how do we reconcile our expectations for students and institutions and our economy at large in light of everything that's been happening with COVID-19. And so to that point, I would like to make sure that everyone is aware that the coordinating board recognizes that COVID-19 has created an unprecedented situation for us, and that no one has the magic ball to figure out what the best or right answer should be right now, or even what the impact is going to be, particularly as we move into fall semester. So based on that, we do want you to know that we're trying to be responsive and that we do have resources. So if you have not already seen or had the opportunity to look at, we have created a website that's dedicated to COVID-19 and COVID-19 related topics. And I'm gonna pop the website in the chat right there. So there's a link for you to look at, where basically this covers sort of what's the big state look in terms of what's happening with COVID, but it also provides guidance on higher ed specifically. So I want to call your attention to, we have a variety of FAQs that I think are particularly useful. We have career and technical education FAQs, courses, calendars, and reporting FAQs. I know we've had a lot of reporting questions. General FAQs and Perkins Grant FAQs. And basically, these are just facts and questions that have come from the field. So anytime there's something that you're wondering about and whether we have any guidance on it in relation to COVID-19, we encourage you to email us, and we will make sure that that gets to the right people. We have a committee that's regularly meeting to discuss COVID-19. And part of what we do is look at what the questions are that have come in, and if it's something that benefits or applies to the majority of our institutions, it becomes part of the FAQs. If it's something that's very specific to your institution, we will reach back out to you directly to discuss it. As of right now, most of the guidance provided covers spring and summer. However, my understanding is we're working on the fall guidance and plan on providing additional guidance soon. We want to make sure that we're being responsive to your needs as you're trying to plan. So if there are timelines we need to be aware of, or if there are pressing questions that you have, please reach out to us. We want to be here to help you as we all try to figure out what is this going to look like for us. So I just want to make sure everyone was aware of that. Another topic that I wanted to address is if your region had outstanding grant funds through either the dissemination grant or one of the other grants we've awarded that would have been set to expire August 31st, we have extended the deadline due to COVID-19 to August 31st of next year. So Luis has been helping facilitate that to make sure that our regions have the chance to use those funds in the future and don't just lose them. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Luis?
I think we have a signed agreement from your region, so I think you're good. Okay,
good. So I just wanted to make sure we were all aware of that. So far, most of our regions have been informed, and this hasn't come as a big shock, but just want to make sure we're all on the same page. For those of you who have been involved in the regional work, you may recall that we typically do surveys around this time of year. So we've got 2 surveys that we ask the institution, or that we ask to be completed. One is the Regional Action Plan Survey, which basically asks you to sort of take stock of, this is where you are, here's what you've accomplished this year, here's what your plan moving forward is. Now, we recognize that COVID-19 is impacting everyone's plans, and we aren't quite sure what to expect. So based on that, this year the survey will definitely include a component that talks about COVID-19 and how you foresee that impacting your efforts as a region. The complement to that regional action plan is the institutional supplement survey, which we ask every institution to complete, which basically asks them to sort of reflect on their progress related to 60 by 30 goals and stakeholder awareness across the institution concerning those efforts. So what I would like to know from you all is, these are typically due August 31st. Does that timeline make sense for everything that you have happening at your institutions right now? Or is that something we should be considering shifting? I know we have a number of workforce people still on the line. Do we have any of our institutional representatives still in the call? Are there any initial thoughts on whether August 31st makes sense to ask for feedback on regional efforts and institutional supplement surveys?
I don't think we got Yvette back, so I'll be sure to follow up with her if unless someone has some thoughts.
And it's okay if you don't have an immediate response, or if you feel like you need to connect with others and get back to us. Thank you for that. Yes, I understand how on day 4 you may not be able to answer that question. If there are colleagues that you want to reach out to and then get back with Sherry or myself, we will be happy to take into consideration whatever your recommendations are concerning the timeline. We want to make sure that we're moving forward with efforts. However, we also want to be respectful of other responsibilities you have going on. I mean, we understand the end of August is always a busy time for institutions, and probably even more so this year with all the unknowns as we try to move forward. So if you have any thoughts with those, please contact us and let us know. Now, the big question that already came up was target projections. So for those of you who have been involved in the plan, you may know that we have talked about all along as 2020 being sort of a key point to take stock of the plan and sort of decide, are there adjustments that need to be made? Do we need to think about reframing our metrics or our goals? I will tell you that the agency leadership is discussing and looking at the larger 60 by 30 plan. And if they should decide to make any changes right now, that will definitely trickle down to our regional work, and we will let you all know. However, when we originally were thinking 2020 made sense for this shift, obviously none of us were planning for COVID-19. And so at this point, rather than saying, let's reassess all the targets and change the projections at the regional level, we're just asking that you all to continue to do what you do best, which is serving your students. Staying focused on the students, the workers, you know, for those of you that are on the workforce side, that you're serving and making sure that their needs are met. And as we get a better look at sort of what the impact is going to be, then we'll start to think about how we shift targets and what makes sense. Because since none of us have that magic ball right now, we aren't really sure what the best direction that is to go right now. So, so that gets back to our point earlier from Alma in terms of right now that focus is on, let's make sure we're putting our students first, and then we'll sort of see as things develop what makes sense. Any thoughts or reactions to that?
This is Alma. It's good. Thank you for the update. I'm glad that at least we know that they're discussing it, which is important. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think everybody is, and that's, and I think that goes across the board for a lot of the different agencies that we work with, and where there's metrics and targets and stuff like that. It's a reassessment, but there's so many unknowns. I mean, March seems like forever ago. You know what I mean? When this first kind of really started to come into play, especially here in Texas and stuff. So, you know, well, I think hoping that, you know, the institutions will be able to provide you a better assessment of where they are in August, and then, you know, that takes it into consideration. The only thing I would say is, I think for our region, I know, you know, you guys, you've heard me say this before, but one of the things that we've been kind of walking around, and I'm not sure exactly what the final decision is going to be, is that we do have a lot of adult learners in our community. So yes, we do have one of the highest post-enrollment rates in the highest in the state, but the completion rate, you know, and the persistence rates are an issue. And because of that, alternative education options are pretty big, and that doesn't necessarily fall into the institutions that are reporting out to this metric, but I think that also affects the number of completion rates and certifications and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of data that we can provide you. I just think it's a really important discussion to, we're going to still keep advocating for it, because even under the governor's tri-agency umbrella, under Texas Workforce Commission, there's so much flexibility in funding training programs that are sometimes not in the traditional institutions that report to the coordinating board. And so I'm thinking if even at the state level, if they allow it with that much, you know, with so much emphasis on that, and like the quick certs and things like that, that could be really valuable. And I think because of COVID, if that was already kind of happening before, that's just going to get really exasperated now. You know, that was on turbo, and so there are a lot of really good certification programs out there that are very valuable and are really going to achieve what, like, the intent of the 60 by 30 is to have a very ready workforce and promote Texas that way, right? I mean, that's like the big picture part.
Right.
So I just kind of want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that too. I mean, and I know that's not an easy answer because it's a lot more complex than that.
Right.
But that's kind of what I also wanted to share.
So,
and I do, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, in response to that, I do want to say that I want you to know that that is on our minds, and your region certainly isn't the only region to have brought up that sort of gap there, in terms of we're missing out on the opportunity to think about education and what that means at different levels. And I will tell you that we are definitely having conversations about thinking about the idea of like certificates of value and what that means, and sort of trying to ensure that, you know, we are considering what are all the options that make sense for us to be pushing forward under the umbrella of the 60 by 30 plan.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much. I appreciate all the work. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Elizabeth, I had a question.
Yes.
You all have these links now, so you can go play with the data, look at all the results. We've been looking at them in preliminary form for a while, not as pretty as the Tableau formats that Louise put together, but still, we've been looking at the data for a while. And Elizabeth, I was wondering if you could give us give this group a little bit of information about the direct enrollment from high school to college numbers. The numbers for the Upper Rio Grande went down. The numbers for the state went down.
Yes.
And so that is what I'd like to ask you is if you all think of that as being a significant change, or perhaps something to watch and see, and or some of the things that you've already looked at to try to figure out why that has happened in that happened in 2022.
So we have actually been looking at the high school to higher ed direct enrollment, and we do have some additional data that we plan to share with you in the future about it, but we've been trying to kind of look at this and think about what do we know about what's contributing to this. And it's basically what we found is, as with everything, right, there is no magic bullet clear answer of this is what's causing this. I can tell you that the trend is definitely happening statewide. It's not just in your region. And we're trying to really figure out what's contributing to that. And we do think one piece that's contributing is the summer melt piece, in terms of, you know, we do have more students who are applying and going through the initial steps, but then not actually enrolling in the fall in college. So we have some additional information that we'd like to share with you, and I'll get with you, Sherry, on when it makes sense to share that with your region, and we can take a more in-depth look specifically at the high school to higher ed pipeline. I appreciate you bringing that up. So on that note, unless anyone has any other burning questions they want addressed right now, I just wanted to share with you, I know Rachel did an exit ticket for you, and that's really sort of focused on her piece of the training, where she sort of looks at how can Maya improve their equity training, but also helps us think about how we can continue to move equity forward at the agency. I just shared a link with you, and I just popped it in chat and also sent an email for a second survey. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to survey you to death, but this is a brief survey that basically gathers some information about you know, the session itself today, but the second half asks you to really think about and reflect for us on what you feel like is working in the regional efforts, and looking for, this is an opportunity for you to share some thoughts in terms of where you think, what you think we should be offering in terms of support for the regional efforts. So I would ask that you please take a few minutes and fill that out for us. And I want to thank everyone for their time today and their engagement. I think we had phenomenal engagement during the training, and appreciate all the questions and comments as we went through the dashboards, and just encourage you to reach out to us if you have additional thoughts about equity or about your data or about anything related to our regional efforts. And with that, I will leave off for if Sherry has any final thoughts she would like to add, or if Ruby has anything she would like to add.
It was just awesome to spend this time together. It felt like we got to know each other a little bit, even though it was virtually done. That's a testament to how skillful Rachel and Ruby and Elizabeth and Louise have been. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Nothing else, just again, just kind of echoing what you all have said, just appreciate everyone's participation and engagement, and we look forward to continue to work with you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.